Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Please remain standing for a minute. Saturday night, we had the unfortunate accident of David Prouty graduate Stephen Healy, who was killed in a motorcycle accident just outside the entrance of the high school. So I'd ask for a moment of silence for Stephen. Thank you. We have a very short agenda tonight. This was a special meeting to discuss the new superintendent's contract. We had a little bit of housekeeping items that needed to be taken up, and we'll do that now. The first item on the agenda will be a high school trip request for Mr. Bayshant.
Good evening, thank you. We have two trips here. One of them has already taken place. It was the golf team going to the state championship. Unfortunately, the way the policy is written, we're supposed to notify you well in advance. However, they found out they were going to the state championship about 4 or 5 days before it actually happened. So that's, you have a packet regarding that. The second one, and that happened October 26th. That was a Saturday night into Sunday, so that those kids, it's just an experience. There was a kid on that team that went as a freshman, and he remembered that experience from that time. So it was 6 individuals with 2 adults, and unfortunately they didn't place, but it was a good experience for them. The second one,
If I may, Dave, just so the committee understands that there was a state tournament, and we're governed by the schedule of MIAA. So as David said, it was unfortunate that we don't have a lot of advance notice when we get to that point. And as much as we want to anticipate our athletes making it to the state tournaments, it's not over till it's over. So
Correct.
that kind of cut us short. But the youngsters did stay over in Milford, and then the following day, I believe, they had their tournament match in Franklin. Unfortunately.
Phyllis. Yep.
Unfortunately, we did not prevail, but it certainly was a wonderful experience for those student athletes.
Correct.
So that's the fuller explanation.
Correct.
I want to make sure.
Do you have to take them one at a time, or is that just an explanation for that one?
No.
You're good. The second trip, I have Becky Boussier here. Becky has turned around a chorus music program, second to none, I think, at least in Central Mass. Her work ethic is second to none. I don't know how she does it. But she has several trips. She gave me a list at the start of the school year of about 12 or 15 different trips that the show choir, Shockwave, chamber choir, all these groups she started, go and take part in. I was just flipping through my forms and noticed that this trip to Oliver Ames High School, it's an overnight trip. They leave Friday into Saturday. And they hook up with the Shepherd Hill kids, and they all go down on several buses, and they all perform, and they stay overnight at those other kids' houses. It's a pretty nice little function. And she's done it 2 years in a row. This will be their 3rd year in a row. But I did notice that, hey, that never got approved at school committee, and we were fortunate to get it on the agenda tonight. So I'm asking for your consideration regarding that. If you have any questions, Becky would be more than happy to answer.
Dr. Malvey, do you have anything to add?
No, I wish them luck. I always get excited when I see our performers going off to different venues, because that's really I think, the pinnacle of what their talents are. It's nice to have them home, but having seen so many of groups throughout my years, it's always a real treat when they're out around and about with other talented youngsters throughout the state. So good luck.
Any questions from any board members in regards to this trip? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Motion approved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made by Mr. Nordquist. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Heather. Ms. Messier. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks, Becky.
The next item on the agenda is going to be an update from the superintendent in regards to the business manager. You may recall, when the subcommittee met, we asked the superintendent to check out some references. We still are not at the point of naming who that person is and stuff, so the superintendent will just give us an update in generality as to where he is with the checks.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. I did share some information with the committee this evening, but I'm going to ask them to still keep it in confidence at this stage, because in that it was the superintendent's review, if you will, and then the superintendent formed an executive committee. We still can keep it as a confidential matter. In that, I don't have confirmation yet from the candidate. I have contacted, probably a half a dozen references that were provided by the individual, and I'll comment on that in just a second. But in my final review today, trying to reach the candidate, both at home and at work, I was not successful in getting a response. I understand that the individual was fairly well tied up in meetings for most of the day, so I hope to have a response by tomorrow. So with that, I don't want to formally come forward this evening and make the recommendation until I speak to the candidate to make sure that she's on board. I would expect so, subject to negotiation, so that's how I would prefer to leave it. But with respect to the references of both current employers that she's working with, as well as folks in the past, including a former superintendent that she worked with for several years, all to a person spoke very, very highly of her. And in particular, in one of the environments that she was in 4 or 5 years ago, in a college setting, speaking to an executive finance person in that particular college who worked very, very closely with her. She had nothing but praise, not only from her knowledge of finances and accounting, but her ability to deal with reports. And this happened to be a state institution. And if we think we have it involved at a local school level, the colleges and universities at the state level, probably a double and triple. So with that, she comes highly, highly recommended. And when I asked all of the reference contacts if there was anything there that might be a surprise to us going down the road, and they took some time before they answered and said unequivocally that there certainly were no issues there that would come forward other than positive things from her background. So I'm comfortable with going forward with the recommendation, but as I said, I'll hold until I can get confirmation from her. And then also I have the item on that we can talk somewhat about contract provisions too later on in this meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Malby. The next item will be executive sessions for the board. We will go into executive session to discuss contract negotiations for the new superintendent of schools and to discuss contract negotiations for the new business manager. The chair would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Cludier, a second.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Napton. On a roll call vote. Mr. King.
Aye.
Mr. Ethia.
Aye.
Mr. Messier.
Aye.
Mr. Cludier.
Aye.
Ms. Napton.
Aye.
Mr. Nodquist.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. We will reconvene to discuss our votes in executive session. We're going to reconvene the meeting in open session. Before I forget, would all members make sure that they sign the warrants and stuff before you leave, so that the girls won't have to be trying to find people tomorrow. Okay, the first item of business is going to be to approve our contract for the new superintendent of schools. The chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to appoint Nadine Tracy Crow as Superintendent of Schools effective November 17th, 2014, subject to receipt of her recent personnel files, Corey, and fingerprint checks.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Napton. Any discussion? On a roll call vote, Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Ethia?
Aye.
Mrs. Messier?
Aye.
Mr. Cludier?
Aye.
Ms. Napton?
Aye.
Mr. Nodquist?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Second motion would be to ratify the superintendent's contract. Is there a motion?
Motion to ratify the employment agreement between the Spencer East Brookfield Regional School District and the Superintendent of Schools for a period beginning November 17th, 2014 through June 30th, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Napton. Any further discussion? On a roll call vote, Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Ethia?
Aye.
Mrs. Messier?
Aye.
Mr. Cludier?
Aye.
Ms. Napton?
Aye.
Mr. Nordquist?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Congratulations, Tracy, as our new superintendent of schools. We look forward to you coming on board and working. The next would be a motion to end the interim superintendent appointment and contract. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, a motion to approve the termination of Dr. Malvy's employment and his employment contract as interim superintendent effective November 16th, 2014.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Napton. Further discussion? On a roll call vote, Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Ethia?
Aye.
Mrs. Messier?
Aye.
Mr. Cludier?
Aye.
Ms. Napton?
Aye.
Mr. Nordquist?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Next would be a motion to retain as a consultant.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the retention of Dr. Malvy as a consultant at the same pay he is receiving as interim superintendent for the period from November 17th, 2014 through November 28th, 2014, to assist, as requested by our newly appointed superintendent, with the transition of the district administration to the new superintendent of schools.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Napkin. Further discussion? Mr. King?
Aye.
Roll call vote. Mr. Ethia?
Aye.
Mrs. Messier?
Aye.
Cludier?
Aye.
Ms. Napton?
Aye.
Mr. Nordquist?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Next motion is for personnel appointments.
Mr. Chairman, I move to request the interim superintendent to defer all permanent personnel appointments and any contracts in relation thereto to the new superintendent of schools after November 10th, 2014.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Napton. Further discussion? On a roll call vote, Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Ethia?
Aye.
Mrs. Messier?
Aye.
Mr. Cludier?
Aye.
Ms. Napton?
Aye.
Mr. Nordquist?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Next motion is to authorize the business manager contract.
Mr. Chairman, I move to authorize an employment agreement between the Spencer East Brookfield Regional School District and a new business manager to be negotiated by a subcommittee consisting of the chair of the school committee and the chair of the negotiating subcommittee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Napton. Further discussion? On a roll call vote, Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Ethia?
Aye.
Mrs. Messier?
Aye.
Mr. Cludier?
Aye.
Ms. Napton?
Aye.
Mr. Nordquist?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Next motion is regarding funding of vacant positions.
Mr. Chairman, I move to freeze all the funding of vacant positions between November 10th and November 17th, 2014.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Napton. Further discussion? On a roll call vote, Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Ethia?
Aye.
Mrs. Messier?
Aye.
Mr. Cludier?
Aye.
Ms. Napton?
Aye.
Mr. Nordquist?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That concludes the business before the board. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Napton. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Ethia. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Thank you.